Imagine this banana is a Byrna less lethal launcher, capable of shooting rock-hard kinetic and tear gas mixed with pepper chemical irritants.
The ammo can incapacitate an attacker from 60 feet away without causing death.
This Byrna less lethal launcher is legal in all 50 states. No permits required.
Over 600,000 Byrna pistol launchers have been sold to government agencies, law enforcement agencies, and to private citizens.
Do you want to know what the Byrna less lethal launcher looks like? Visit Byrna.com.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. Let's get straight to our guest, the Director of National Intelligence and Great American Patriot, Tulsi Gabbard. Director Gabbard, great to see you. Thank you for taking the time. And let me say on behalf of the audience, thank you for digging and getting to the bottom of what stole so much of the first Trump presidency, the first Trump term, I should say, and for having the guts and the courage to dig deep. Declassifying that House report was so important. And so, Director Gabbard, can you just take a moment here and remind the audience of everything that you have now made public and that you have learned over the past last week? Because it's just been a whirlwind of news. So please take a moment just to take a step back and tell the audience what we have learned, please.
Sure, Charlie. Thank you so much. And thanks for your coverage of this really important disclosure that has ramifications that are very far reaching and that speak to the integrity of our democratic republic and nothing short of that. I'll try to be brief because we've released a lot of information over the last week, starting with last week, Friday, releasing a whistleblower's report, emails, communications, copies of a president's daily brief, one that was drafted but pulled hours before it was to be released and never published, as well as one that was actually published. We released yesterday, as you mentioned, the House Intelligence Committee Majority Staff Oversight Report that investigated a document that President Obama ordered the intelligence community to put together, the January 2017 Intelligence Community Assessment, that basically came to the conclusion that Putin, Russia, had tried to influence and impact the outcome of the election in favor of Donald Trump. The real headline here is that the months leading up to the 2016 election, remember this was Donald Trump running against Hillary Clinton, the intelligence community consistently assessed over and over again that Russia had neither the intent nor the capability to impact the outcome of the U.S. election. And that's a really important point here, because in early December, after Donald Trump was elected, after he defeated Hillary Clinton in that historic election, President Obama called together a meeting of his National Security Council leadership. This was people like CIA Director John Brennan, then Obama's Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, Susan Rice, Andy McCabe, and many others on his senior cabinet national security team. What came out from that meeting was ultimately, and this is all documented, direction from President Obama to his team to create an intelligence community assessment that detailed how Moscow meddled in the U.S. election in favor of Donald Trump. The key point here is not if Moscow meddled, it was how. And this is where a lot of the mainstream media right now who are reporting and repeating the Russia hoax lie over and over again for years are refusing to address this key point. Is the document that the intelligence community created that was published in January of 2017 contradicted the other assessments that the intelligence community provided in the months leading up to the election, including the days leading after the election, by stating very clearly and with high confidence, which is a big deal coming from the intelligence community, that Putin intervened in the 2016 election to help Donald Trump get elected. What we released yesterday in the House Intelligence Oversight Staff Majority Report was a very detailed investigation into that January 2017 assessment that, again, CIA Director John Brennan, DNI James Clapper at the time assessed with high confidence the conclusions that were driven in that report. What was revealed yesterday was that they created this knowing that it was false. They used intelligence and sources that were substandard, did not meet basic intelligence community tradecraft analytics standards, and used things that they knew were discredited, like the Steele dossier. They knew it was discredited. They knew it was a politically manufactured document. James Clapper and John Brennan decided to use it anyway. So here's the bottom line up front. President Obama ordered a manufactured intelligence assessment in order to ultimately enact what would be a years-long coup against Donald Trump, using this document that, again, did not reflect the intelligence community's overall assessments leading up to the election. And it was used as a foundation to be able to undermine the legitimacy of President Trump's election and everything that came after.
Thank you for that summary. And so I want to now just emphasize one point of this. So the entire Russia narrative was on faulty, shoddy intelligence. Is that also included in what some of the skeptics or some of the critics would say? Because they say, well, Bob Mueller found in 2019 all these different reports of Russia trying to influence the election. But we're not contesting, though, at least from my understanding, that Russia was trying to sow discord or chaos. I think that's well received and well accepted. What is the contention here is that there is no evidence, in fact, there's evidence to the contrary, that Russia was doing any of it to help Donald Trump. And even beyond that, Brennan went on to say that Adam Schiff went on to say it, Brennan alluded to it, that Trump did it in collusion with the Russian government. Can you speak to this? Because in some ways, the media is being very crafty. So, for example, the media would say, well, there's a 2017 intelligence community assessment supported by bipartisan Senate intelligence that says that Russia did interfere with the election. And some people would say that, well, there was a 2019 report that says Russia did interfere with the election. You're not debating that. You're not contending that. You're saying, but they were not interfering to help Trump. Can you please elaborate on that and push back on some of the criticism?
Yeah, Charlie, thanks. That is the important point here. And I think it should also be of note that this is where the critics of what we revealed are going to. This is where President Obama's team and Senator Warner and other members of Congress are going to that exact point. They're saying, hey, look, nothing to see here. Everybody knows and agrees that Russia tried to meddle in the 2016 election. I don't disagree with that statement. Here's the point of distinction. Is that there is no credible intelligence that points to Russia or Putin meddling in the 2016 election in order to try to get Donald Trump elected, period. And I think one of the most significant pieces of evidence that was revealed in that report we released yesterday is the fact that Russia claimed to have very, very damaging information, high-level DNC emails relating specifically to Hillary Clinton's physical and mental health, and DNC leaders questioning whether or not, if elected, she would even be capable of carrying out the duties of the presidency. Russia had this. If they wanted to swing the election for Donald Trump, they would have released it in September, October of 2016 at a pivotal time to swing momentum into Donald Trump's direction and damage Hillary Clinton's campaign. They did not do that deliberately. They understood that Hillary Clinton would likely be the inevitable president of the United States. They didn't think Trump could win, like a lot of other people. And so they were withholding this damaging information about Hillary Clinton and planning to release it in the days or weeks leading up to her expected inauguration, in order to once again sow chaos within the United States, to draw into question the stability of our country and what kind of leadership would be in place. This cuts to the core of the problem with the January 2017 President Obama ordered manufactured intelligence document. They willfully omitted this intelligence that existed because it didn't support the false narrative they intentionally built once again, which is the intelligence community says with high confidence that Putin aspired to and helped get Donald Trump elected in 2016.
And just on top of that, the information that Russia had on Hillary Clinton, she was on tranquilizers. Could you imagine that as an October surprise? Oh, by the way, the woman that couldn't get into her van on the 9/11 memorial. Remember that? There was that video that went viral. She's also on tranquilizers. She was asking the State Department for asking people for donations in return of her State Department policy, and Russia didn't use any of it. So Director Gabbard, I want to now talk about one thing that has gone very viral, and I think it would be very helpful for our audience to hear from you on this. And again, what happened here is so dishonest, underhanded, and we are cheering you on, and we have your back 100%. You've used this, the phrase, a treasonous conspiracy. Those are fighting words. Those are big words. And I could tell you, the people in this audience, they know that and they agree with that. But can you make the case, can you present the argument to the best ability you can with unclassified information and public information, what makes you believe that this reaches that sort of threshold?
When we look at our democratic republic, Charlie, our system is built on the foundation of the American people casting their votes for who they want to be in office, to be our president and commander-in-chief. In this system, there is to be a peaceful transition of power. What we saw play out here was President Trump was elected by the American people in 2016, shocking most people in the United States, and apparently even Russia and Putin didn't think that he would win. Instead of accepting that this is the will of the people, what we saw is President Obama convening his national security team and concocting this contrived false narrative through the production of this intelligence community assessment in January 2017 with the specific intent of subverting the will of the American people and trying to delegitimize President Trump's election, and therefore everything that he had been charged to do by the American people over the next 4 years. So, yes, this is a treasonous conspiracy that subverts the will of the American people, because you look at the action. They manufactured a hoax. They manufactured these lies, published it as though it were true, propagated this through the media to the American people. And then what happened next? The Mueller investigation, years-long Mueller investigation was launched. You had 2 impeachments coming from Congress. You had a raid on President Trump's home in Mar-a-Lago by the FBI. You had smears and attacks and investigations not only against President Trump, but against his family, his senior officials within his administration. You even saw the geopolitical impacts of this, where a whole sanctions package was passed against Russia by President Obama, specifically
Correct.
because of the thing that they claimed Russia did, but they actually didn't do in this case. This was a lie that was concocted by President Obama and his senior national security officials. And this January 2017 intelligence community assessment is that foundation for everything that came after. And I just want to point out again, I was in the White House press briefing room yesterday, and reporters saying, well, do you believe this or do you believe that? This is not about Tulsi Gabbard's beliefs or opinions or even
Bingo.
allegations. Read the intelligence, read the evidence, read the emails from DNI Clapper's executive assistant to leaders within the intelligence community that says, per the president's directive, and then going on and listing the taskings for this intelligence community assessment. I doubt many of those reporters have actually read the nearly 200 pages themselves, like you have, because anyone who is a little bit objective who would read that would draw the same view that you and I have, that the truth is very real and it's irrefutable. President Obama led this treasonous conspiracy with the help of a lot of folks in his national security cabinet and in the intelligence community.
Director Gabbard, we have to let you go. I just want to say we're cheering you on in the audience because we remember how nasty, how divisive, how unnecessary all that Russia stuff was. And now our involvement in a kinetic hot war against Russia could be probably traced back to Russiagate. Keep fighting. Stay brave. Director Gabbard, thank you so much for your time. Okay, so what was the significance of what Director Gabbard said? And this is why you need to watch any of the mainstream media outlets with a very trained eye and trained ear. She has never once contended that Russia tried to sow chaos in the 2016 election. Many countries and many of our adversaries, they just try to sow confusion or chaos. Iran does this. The Chinese Communist Party does this. They'll do this through hacking or social media work. But that's not the same thing as trying to elevate a specific candidate. That is where all the intel agencies and their proxies and their spokespeople and their mockingbird media propagandists peddled a lie. And that sort of nuance was undetectable in the mainstream media for quite some time. When James Comey and Brennan went up, they said, well, Russia, as you know, here's this, and this is what they would do. It's such a sleight of hand. It's a Houdini. It's a magician's trick. They hide the pocket ace so that you can't see it. It is a rhetorical and narrative sleight of hand where they say, well, as you know, we all agree that Russia tried to interfere with the election. And so obviously Donald Trump was benefited by Russia. Smoke and mirrors. Those are not the same thing. So what they did is they conflated a singular truth with something that is a complete lie, and then they made the bridge. They say, Donald Trump likes autocratic dictators, so therefore he must like Vladimir Putin. There is this clip that we played yesterday of James Comey and John Brennan. It's kind of this combo clip. I would like to play it. I don't know what cut it is. Maybe I can find it here. And the combo clip is 365. It's very important. So listen to this. This is just, again, we could play hundreds of these pieces of tape. This is the rhetorical media smoke and mirrors. Rachel Maddow fell for it. In fact, she was a chief propagandist of it, where they took a kernel of truth and they built a narrative mountain of lies. Play cut 365.
Russians interfered in our election during the 2016 cycle. It is a high confidence judgment of the entire intelligence community.
It was Russia in a very systematic way tried to interfere in the election and to try to advance the prospects of Donald Trump being elected.
Donald Trump knows that the Russians helped him win in 2016. There will always be an air of illegitimacy around the 2016 campaign.
Okay, I have to compliment the studio team. That series of clips is the best. That is a 10 out of 10 series of clips. Let me tell you why. Because Comey is actually testifying in a fact pattern that is real. He says, as you know, Russia interfered with the election. So they have that baseline fact pattern. But it wasn't even interference, guys. It was like a bunch of social media trolls and bots. They did not hack voting machines. They did not manipulate stuff. So then you have that baseline Comey. This is why that clip is so important. You transition to Brennan. The first part of Brennan's sentence is correct. He says, well, the Russians interfered with the 2016 election. The second part of the sentence is where you're getting into not just malpractice, but you're getting into some really immoral and dark stuff to help and advance the prospects of Donald Trump becoming president. Not only was there no evidence, there was evidence to the contrary. Remember, John Brennan is the one who forced the inclusion of bad intelligence in the reports, per the House report that was declassified. And then you have the final part of the clip. Do you see how the lies bubble up from one kernel of truth when they don't get checked and regulated on cable TV? Then Hillary Clinton tranquilized up, saying, well, Donald Trump knows that the Russians helped him back in 2016. Whoa. So we start with Comey saying something true, for a change, in front of Congress. Then Brennan adds that little subtext, thanks to Rachel Maddow and all these other people that built the fable, the legend, the chronicle of Russia collusion, to then Hillary Clinton just completely lie about it. You see, these lies are laundered through each other, often with unrelated truths. So they cook the books with intel, but they say something that starts to be true. They add a little bit of rhetorical flair on top of it with a very impressive biography. I'm John Brennan, the former CIA director. And then boom, it seeps in and it changes American politics forever. And that's why that piece of tape is so important. From Comey to Brennan to Clinton, you can see the growth, the evolution. You can see how it starts with something correct and grows into something that is a total and complete fabrication. Listen very carefully here. Comey starts with, well, we know that Russia interfered. You have to have a trained ear for this stuff. And then Brennan repeats the first part of what Comey says and adds his own little fake rhetorical flair that no intelligence supported. And then Hillary Clinton finishes the second part of Brennan's sentence with her own thing saying Donald Trump knew about it. So it grows and it snowballs into this monstrosity of a falsehood. Play cut 365 again.
Russians interfered in our election during the 2016 cycle. It is a high confidence judgment of the entire intelligence community.
It was Russia in a very systematic way in trying to interfere in the election and to try to advance the prospects of Donald Trump being elected.
Donald Trump knows that the Russians helped him win in 2016. There will always be an air of illegitimacy around the 2016 campaign.
And there you have it. That's how your intel agencies work, with orchestration, conspiracy, with collusion, and in harmony. Per the House report, the claim that Trump wanted, the claim that Putin wanted Trump to win was based on one fragment of a sentence, when in reality, there was an overwhelming pile, an overwhelming plethora, an overwhelming amount of evidence to the exact 180 opposite contrary. We're not debating whether or not Russia tried to sow chaos in the 2016 election. What we are now learning is that they were not doing anything to help Donald Trump. In fact, they had information that could have helped Donald Trump, and they did not use it. Instead, they sat on the sidelines. There was no Russian interference on behalf of Trump, let alone Trump knowing about it. We got so far, we were even down the runway saying that Trump was directly communicating with Kremlin assets to help him, to help advance his prospects. The media is so complicit in this. And Hillary Clinton says, well, 2016 will always have this air of illegitimacy. That is pile of BS. She didn't visit Wisconsin and Michigan. You lost, Hillary, and it wasn't because of the Russians. It's because of you. Because you tranquilized yourself too much and refused to leave the woods and go campaign in Waukesha, Wisconsin, or in Butler, Pennsylvania. The ruling class will never take responsibility for their failures. And they found the perfect institution to blame, the perfect enemy, the Russian Federation. How much of the hate of Russia amongst the American people was all based on a lie? And it's finally being exposed. Okay, joining us now is Megan Basham, author of Shepherds for Sale, Daily Wire culture reporter. Megan, great to see you. Been praying for your health. And thank you so much for taking the time. Your book, Shepherds for Sale, is terrific. So, Megan, in this report that was declassified, the House Intelligence Report, on page 19, there was, quote, the Russian Federal Security Service in August had details of secret meetings with named security services. And the Russians had the dirt on Hillary, never released it, but it begs a much different question. Are our Christian shepherds for sale? Megan, welcome to the program. Please walk us through it all.
Thanks for having me, Charlie. It's always good to be here. So yes, that was a rather stunning little tidbit in this declassified report that we found out that the State Department under Hillary Clinton was meeting with these unnamed religious groups, and it was essentially a quid pro quo arrangement. If you support Hillary Clinton for president, if you throw your weight as these ministry leaders behind her, we are going to increase your financing and offer you, quote unquote, State Department patronage. So at this point, we don't know who these religious organizations are. I'm filing a FOIA to find out. But, I have some pretty strong suspicions based on all of the reporting that I've done on this subject and went into deep detail in my book, Shepherds for Sale. And, I can give you the example of the National Association of Evangelicals. It is an extremely large and influential group. It represents thousands, hundreds of thousands of evangelicals, millions all over the country, all over the world. And what they did in 2016 was one of their board members, surprisingly, came out for Hillary Clinton. And, that to me kind of put my spidey senses off, because I went, why would somebody from the National Association of Evangelicals suddenly start making the rounds in Politico and other major news outlets supporting Hillary Clinton? And one of the things you can look at is that the immigration resettlement arm of the National Association of Evangelicals did indeed receive a lot of funding in the Biden administration from the federal government to resettle, quote unquote, refugees, asylum seekers. So we don't know who these groups are, but we certainly know that it was surprising when a board member of the National Association of Evangelicals came out for Hillary Clinton. And, I can look at other examples of this sort of strange bedfellows happening. There is a group called the American Values Coalition. They are a Never Trump group. They've been extremely active. And in 2024, they launched a faith initiative. And its purpose, in its own terms, is to disciple. They use that word, disciple America's pastors on politics. They said they want to reframe evangelicals' political imagination. Well, when you look at who sits on the board of this organization, one of them is the board chair, a man named Neil Rickner. His company, a energy company, a wind solar kind of company, received $1.2 million from the Biden administration's Department of Defense shortly after they launched this faith initiative with their Never Trump group. So we don't know yet, but we can look at these very strange associations and how they are coming into churches to try to not just influence church members, but to specifically influence pastors so that the pastors will influence their church members.
So I just want to brag on you, Megan. You have done such incredible work here, probably the best, by far the best, journalism and investigative research in how the American church is for sale and how many of our pastors and how many of our Christian nonprofits just sell their soul literally to secular nonprofits or to foreign donors. And so I want to play cut 422, and I'll allow you to talk about this in a second. So let's play cut 422, and then I'll let you explain it.
And I think it's important that we recognize that we've never had in this country, especially within the church, a moment of profound enlightenment around those issues. And so we go all the way back to the 19th century. The church and I have some kind of major gospel epiphany that talked about we're going to work for the interests of the restoration of the freedmen. We never had that. And so throughout our history, the church's voice was contra to every meaningful gain that Black people were trying to pursue.
Okay, what were we listening to here, Megan, and the significance of it?
So that was an interview training session with the J29 Coalition. So that is that faith initiative of the American Values Coalition. Now, they use this sort of lingo to appeal to Christians to sound like, hey, we're just like you, we're conservative Christians too. And, when you hear American values, you think that's me. Well, no, this is actually a progressive group, a Never Trump group. And so that is part of its faith initiative training. And when you look at the coaches that they're using, it's people like David French of the New York Times, who, endorsed Harris over Donald Trump in the 2024 election. It's Russell Moore, editor-in-chief of of Christianity Today, who is a confirmed Never Trumper. So it's very much a group that is on the progressive side. It is very anti-Trump. And so this is the group whose board chair received that $1.2 million grant from the federal government during 2024, during the Biden administration. So we see these groups coming in, and what they said very specifically is, we want to disciple conservative pastors. So it wasn't like they just wanted to get to any pastors. They've been very specific that they want to target conservative pastors. But what you just heard there is the kind of theology that they're espousing. It's something known as liberation theology. And in fact, it is really just Marxism repackaged with kind of churchy language. And so they will argue things like you just heard there, which is that we need to achieve equity by paying out reparations through affirmative action. So they come in under the guise of being conservative Christians, but that's the kind of thing they're teaching. It's the kind of thing that very few doctrinally sound conservative pastors would ever bring into their church. And yet they're finding ways to do this. They're coming in with funding from the left and saying, hey, let us have access to your pastors, to your church members. And, I do want to clarify here that the Clintons have a long history of doing this. This is actually not new, what we just learned at State Department. Their Clinton Foundation has funneled money into evangelical front groups for decades in order to get Christians to take up something like, say, anti-human climate change policy. So the Clinton Foundation funneled a lot of money into an evangelical front group called the Evangelical Environmental Network. So this is not new for them, and I wasn't surprised to see that the State Department had made this gambit to try to say, hey, we will do a quid pro quo with you. You support Hillary Clinton for president, and we will start financing your ministries.
And so, Megan, I want to take a step back here. How big of a problem is this amongst the Christian leaders? And remind the audience what you learned during COVID of how many of these major evangelical thought leaders and major spokespeople were for sale, that put themselves up for auction to the highest bidder.
Yeah, Charlie, it's been a massive problem, and I think it's gone unnoticed for so many years, so that when something like this little tidbit in the House Intelligence Report about these religious groups comes out, people are shocked, and rightly so. But what they need to know is it's very much not something new. What we saw during COVID was Francis Collins, who was then head of the National Institutes of Health, using his associations with all of these high-profile evangelical leaders to try to convince Christians that you needed to do things like submit to government authority in closing your churches, that you needed to submit to getting that vaccine. And in fact, you heard a lot of those voices even arguing against religious exemptions. They were counseling that it is not biblical to seek religious exemptions for these vaccines. Obviously, a lot of Christians strongly disagreed with that. But, that was kind of what I was trying to sound the alarm on in my book. And this just confirmed it, is that this is going on all over the place. And, a big part of it is that you will have these left-wing groups. So you will have something like the Tides Foundation, which is a, massive funder of left-wing priorities like abortion, like the LGBTQ agenda. Same thing with the Rockefeller Foundation. And they funnel money into all of these sort of evangelical front groups so that you don't see their involvement. And it's the same thing with the federal government, because we need to keep in mind that these really large foundations are also typically getting federal grants. So it's a way for all of that money to come in and trickle down to these evangelical leaders. And some of the most high profile have been Christianity Today has been involved with these groups. They take money from secular foundations like the Lilly Endowment, which is the foundational arm of the Eli Lilly pharmacy company. So, we're talking about big pharma here. And all of this has been going on for a really long time. And I think that so many Christians in the pews did not realize how these ministries were trying to speak for them, but representing values that they don't agree with. And so, when my book came out, I think so many people were surprised to hear it. And yet it's been an open secret for years. And now we see it confirmed in the State Department report.
Talk about how Christian groups and nonprofits have been heavily involved in the refugee resettlement issue. Please, you've done great research on this.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. One of the people who sort of spearheaded this, we must bring in Muslims or we're not really Americans, was Russell Moore, who was then head of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, which is the policy lobbying arm of the largest Protestant denomination in the U.S., the Southern Baptist Convention. So it represents some 43 million people across the United States, not a small organization. And now, of course, he is the editor-in-chief at Christianity Today. And he was really one of those loud voices during the first Trump administration saying that we must bring in Muslims in order to show that we're faithful Christians, which was a little confusing. When the Trump administration said, we are going to just put a pause on immigration.
Russell Moore said that? He would never say that, Megan. Russell Moore would never advocate for mass Muslim immigration. Keep going.
Well, and even when it was very reasonable to the American people. So the Trump administration said, we're going to put a pause on allowing immigration from 7 nations, 7 Muslim majority nations where we know that they are hotbeds of terrorism. Well, Russell Moore, in association with the National Association of Evangelicals, again, very large group, with Tim Keller and some others, said that this was unchristian and un-American to even put that pause on. And Russell Moore further argued for the building of mosques in the United States. And, what really happened with the Southern Baptist Convention is people got upset. They said, look, we're Christians, we're Baptists. We don't want our policy arm arguing for the building
of build churches. I mean, what? Right. Sorry, keep going. It's such typical Russell Moore, obviously.
And I want to really drill down on this, Charlie, because you have done such great work with college students on college campuses. And what people need to know is now Russell Moore, along with his partners, a man named Curtis Chang, who is a Democrat professor at Duke Divinity, and David French at the New York Times, they have created a program called the After Party, and it's specifically targeting Christian college campuses. And it is targeting the members of the Council for Christian Colleges and Universities, 185 member schools, including schools that most parents would look at and say, oh, that's a conservative Christian school that I can send my son or daughter to. Schools like Wheaton, like Biola, like Baylor. Well, they brought in this program, and it's entirely left-wing funded. It's funded by, again, the Rockefellers, the Hewletts, who take money from the federal government. And so all of this money is fungible, and it starts to move into all of these other organizations. And then they're targeting conservative Christians to try to say, if you want to be a faithful Christian, you need to be open to these Democrat policies. You need to be open to considering voting for these Democrat politicians who, even though they're pro-abortion, well, but they're also pro-immigration. And so we think both of these issues are pro-life. And so that's how they kind of try to sell it to, I would say, impressionable college students who, may have not thought through these issues. And so they hear that and they say, gosh, I don't want to be on one side, so I have to be open to the party of abortion. And so that's really what these programs do, and they're very insidious.
Megan Basham, you're a hero. Check out the book, Shepherds for Sale, and we're praying for your health. Thank you. God bless you, Megan. Joining us now is Representative Greg Steube, a great American from Florida's 17th Congressional District. Representative Steube, great to see you. Representative Steube, I want to get your reaction on all the Obama Gate news. It is clear that the intel agencies not only lied, but they pushed a untruth, a fabrication on the American people to derail President Trump's first term. Your reaction, sir?
Yeah, and obviously Americans knew that this was going on, but never had this evidence. And as Tulsi had said, irrefutable evidence. If you read this report that has been now released, and I would imagine there's a lot more information that's going to be released, you had Obama, Clapper, Comey, Brennan all actively and intentionally using intelligence that they knew was false to create this Russia collusion narrative to go after President Trump. This was an intentional, deliberate act to undermine President Trump and his presidency. Completely unprecedented, this type of behavior from a president and his higher echelon of intelligence officials. So she's referred this to the DOJ. I know the DOJ has created some type of special group to go after and investigate this for possible crimes. I see this as treason. There's a lot of these individuals who lied under oath to Congress, but there's a statute of limitations for that. So we actually are looking at what that statute of limitations is, and I'm going to do legislation that's going to change the statute of limitations for lying to Congress moving forward. But they're going to have to try to come up and look at a crime that they're not going to have a statute of limitation issue with to charge. This was a conspiracy at the highest level to take down the president of the United States, and there has to be accountability for this. Yeah, so the things that Congress can do is bring these individuals in and depose them under oath and ask them questions based off that intelligence. And what we can also do is bring them in if they're going to try to hide behind classification and say that this information is classified, we can bring them into the SCIF and do it in the SCIF. Now, since Tulsi's released this information, the DOJ has the ability to do that, and obviously they have the power to be able to charge these individuals, which Congress obviously does not have. We could do congressional referrals, but Tulsi has already done that. But to aid in that, obviously intel, judiciary, oversight could bring these individuals in and depose them. It's my anticipation that the DOJ and the strike force is going to do that. But those are certainly things that we could assist in doing, working with the administration to see if there are areas or individuals that we can bring in an oversight capacity, put them under oath and ask them questions. Not in a, you don't want to do a hearing and every person only have 5 minutes. You want to bring them in and depose them under oath. And those three committees that I just referenced all have subpoena power to do that.